As the Cold War thawed and the Berlin Wall came down, a sense of optimism swept across Europe. It seemed like an era of peace and unity was finally dawning. But in the heart of the Balkans, a different story was unfolding. A storm was gathering, fueled by ancient rivalries and modern ambitions. This is the story of Yugoslavia, a country born from the ashes of empires, held together by an iron will, and ultimately torn apart by the very forces it sought to contain. In the early 1990s, while the world watched the Soviet Union unravel, Yugoslavia began to fracture. This complex federation was a mosaic of different peoples: Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, Slovenes, Macedonians. They spoke different languages, practiced different religions: Orthodox Christianity, Catholicism, and Islam had held deeply divergent views of their shared and separate histories. For decades, these differences were managed, but beneath the surface, the tension simmered, waiting for a spark. The end of the Cold War wasn't just a political shift, it was the removal of the external pressures that had helped keep Yugoslavia intact. As the old world order disappeared, the stage was set for one of Europe's most tragic and violent conflicts of the 20th century. How did a nation that once championed a third way between East and West descend into brutal warfare? To understand the collapse, we first need to understand how this unique country was created. Yugoslavia, meaning Land of the South Slavs, was forged in 1918 from the ruins of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires after World War I. The goal was to unite the South Slavic peoples into a single, independent state. It was a noble idea, but a challenging one. These groups had spent centuries under different rulers, developing distinct cultures and political traditions. Serbs, who had fought for their independence from the Ottomans, saw the new kingdom as an extension of their own national project. Croats and Slovenes, coming from the more structured Austro-Hungarian Empire, were wary of Serbian dominance and sought greater autonomy. Its very inception, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, later renamed Yugoslavia, was a balancing act. The central government in Belgrade struggled to reconcile these competing visions. Political instability, ethnic tensions, and economic disparities plagued the young nation throughout the interwar period. Laying a fragile foundation that would be shattered by the outbreak of World War II, the war brought immense suffering, with internal conflicts and a brutal occupation that further deepened the ethnic divides, setting the stage for a new communist-led Yugoslavia to emerge. After the devastation of World War II, a new figure rose to power: Josip Broz Tito. A charismatic communist leader and partisan hero, Tito envisioned a different kind of Yugoslavia. He established a socialist federation composed of 6 republics: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia, plus 2 autonomous provinces within Serbia. His motto was brotherhood and unity. Under his authoritarian rule, overt nationalism was suppressed. He skillfully played the Cold War superpowers against each other, positioning Yugoslavia as a leader of the non-aligned movement and securing a unique level of independence from both the Soviet bloc and the West. Within the country, he granted the republics considerable autonomy, creating a delicate federal system designed to prevent any single ethnic group from dominating the others. This system worked, but it depended almost entirely on Tito's personal authority. He was the glue holding the disparate pieces together. But as he aged, a critical question loomed. What would happen to Yugoslavia after Tito? His death in 1980 created a massive power vacuum. The collective presidency that replaced him was weak and ineffective, unable to manage the deep-seated issues that Tito had kept under control. The fragile balance he had maintained for over 3 decades began to crumble almost immediately. With Tito gone, the forces he had suppressed came roaring back to life. The 1980s were a period of severe economic crisis in Yugoslavia. Soaring inflation and unemployment fueled public discontent, and people began to blame other ethnic groups for their problems. Ambitious politicians saw an opportunity. They started to abandon the idea of Yugoslav unity and instead embraced nationalist rhetoric to consolidate their power. In Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic rose to prominence by championing the cause of Serbs living in other republics, particularly in Kosovo and Croatia. His inflammatory speeches stoked fears and resentments. In response, nationalist movements gained strength in other republics, like Croatia, under Franjo Tuđman. The shared Yugoslav identity that Tito had tried to build was rapidly being replaced by narrower, more aggressive national identities. The political dialogue devolved into squabbling between the republic's leaders. The federal institutions grew paralyzed. The early signs of fragmentation were everywhere, from intellectual debates to graffiti on the streets. The idea of brotherhood and unity was dying, and the path to dissolution was becoming tragically clear. The final collapse began in 1991. Slovenia and Croatia, the two most prosperous republics, grew tired of the political deadlock and the economic drain from the federal system. Citing their right to self-determination, both declared independence in June. The Yugoslav People's Army, or JNA, which was now largely dominated by Serbs, intervened to stop them. In Slovenia, the conflict was brief. After just 10 days of fighting, the JNA withdrew. The international community, initially hesitant to see Yugoslavia break up, quickly recognized Slovenia's independence. But Croatia was a different story. The republic had a large Serb minority who opposed secession, fearing they would become a persecuted minority in a new Croatian state. With support from Milosevic and the JNA, Croatian Serbs declared their own autonomous regions, leading to a full-blown war. Cities like Vukovar and Dubrovnik were besieged and devastated. The fighting was brutal, marked by ethnic cleansing and horrific violence. The international community was slow to react effectively, imposing sanctions but failing to stop the bloodshed. The wars in Slovenia and Croatia were the first dominoes to fall, signaling the violent end of the Yugoslav dream. While war raged in Croatia, the most complex and tragic chapter of Yugoslavia's dissolution was about to begin in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Often called a Yugoslavia in miniature, Bosnia was a true multi-ethnic society, where Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats had lived together for centuries. In 1992, following the lead of Slovenia and Croatia, Bosnia held an independence referendum. Most Bosniaks and Croats voted in favor, but Bosnian Serbs, backed by Serbia, boycotted the vote and declared their own republic. What followed was a devastating three-way war. The Bosnian Serb army, with support from the JNA, laid siege to the capital, Sarajevo, a siege that would last nearly 4 years. The conflict was defined by horrific acts of ethnic cleansing, mass killings, and the establishment of concentration camps. The Srebrenica massacre, where over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were systematically murdered by Bosnian Serb forces, stands as the worst atrocity on European soil since World War II. Foreign powers were divided on how to intervene. United Nations deployed peacekeepers, but they were often powerless to stop the violence. It was only after years of brutal fighting and failed diplomatic efforts that a NATO bombing campaign against Bosnian Serb positions finally forced the warring parties to the negotiating table, leading to the Dayton Accords in 1995, which ended the war but divided the country along ethnic lines. The final flashpoint in the Yugoslav conflicts occurred in the late 1990s in Kosovo. This province within Serbia held deep historical significance for Serbs, but by this time its population was overwhelmingly ethnic Albanian. Under Milosevic, Kosovo's autonomy had been stripped away, leading to systematic repression of the Albanian majority. In response, an ethnic Albanian guerrilla movement, the Kosovo Liberation Army, or KLA, began to attack Serbian police and officials. The Serbian response was brutal, launching a massive crackdown that drove hundreds of thousands of Albanians from their homes, creating a huge humanitarian crisis. Fearing another wave of ethnic cleansing like the one in Bosnia, the international community tried to mediate. When diplomatic efforts failed, NATO launched a 78-day bombing campaign against Serbia in 1999. Without UN Security Council approval, the intervention was controversial but ultimately forced Milosevic to withdraw his forces from Kosovo. The province was placed under UN administration and eventually declared independence in 2008, a move that Serbia still does not recognize. The Kosovo conflict was the final violent chapter in the breakup of Yugoslavia, and its resolution through NATO intervention set a new precedent in international relations, one that continues to be debated in modern Europe. Looking back, the dissolution of Yugoslavia offers profound and unsettling lessons for the 21st century. It serves as a stark reminder of how quickly seemingly stable, Multi-ethnic societies can be torn apart by the potent forces of nationalism, especially when fueled by economic hardship and cynical political leaders. The Balkan Wars shattered the post-Cold War illusion that Europe had moved beyond large-scale, high-intensity conflict. They reintroduced concepts like ethnic cleansing and siege warfare to the continent, leaving deep scars and unresolved tensions that persist to this day. The conflicts fundamentally reshaped the political map of southeastern Europe and tested the limits of international intervention. As we witness the return of major conflicts on the continent today, the story of Yugoslavia's collapse is more relevant than ever. It's a somber tale of how shared identity can fracture, how neighbors can turn on one another, and how the ghosts of history, if not properly confronted, can return to haunt the present. Thank you for watching. If you found this historical analysis insightful, please like, share, subscribe for more deep dives into the events that have shaped our world.